Welcome to The Last Call. It's a conversation between two boozy hacks. I'm John Sweeney in London, and in New York is Mike Weiss. You're drinking your normal?
Yeah. Japanese Roku gin and club soda.
I've got a yuckity yuck. Because I'm become bored with I've actually got a bottle of Italian red, which I'm about to hit shortly. But in the meantime, while waiting for you to sort your bits out, this is Kiemura, which is white wine, pit bull or whatever it's called, some froggy wine, with creme de mure, which is not creme de cassis, the blackcurrant alcoholic liqueur. It's blackberry juice. So basically, I'm drinking rocket fuel Ribena.
Say you posted to Twitter a photograph of some abomination you were making, some spaghetti bolognese with chopped potatoes, and I've never seen across multiple cultures and ethnic cuisine connoisseurs such absolute hatred and antipathy. Basically, I mean, what the fuck is that? I mean, I've seen Iraqis, Georgians, Russians, Italians all come down on you. And I think I actually played a quite significant role by retweeting what you had to say and show the world this horrific Frankensteinian concoction you made.
What it was, I'm British, and
you don't say.
All of us have to wrestle with our inner Nigel Farage, and I find it weird to put carrots in spag bol. And Tim Shipper's, Tim Shipman, who is a very, very good Boris watcher on the Sunday Times, put up a picture earlier in the day of his spaghetti bolognese with carrots in it, which is what the Italians, how it should be done. I now know, but I just thought that was wrong. But I was working hard. I was actually working, and so what I did do was chop up the garlic, which, if you're British, is what you put in fancy food. I chopped up the garlic and fried that a bit, and then I thought, fuck it, I'm a bit. I want to get back to writing, and so I just chopped everything up, put it in, and all I was making the point was there's no carrots in it, which is proper British spag bol. I did not realize the kind of total. I mean, there was a beautiful woman from Mosul who's now in the States.
Rachel Keaty, she's my colleague.
Right, yeah. Anyway,
at New Lines, and she came down on you like a ton of bricks.
Yeah. But it was when kind of Iraq. I've been to Mosul. I was when Saddam was in charge. Back in the good old days, as Michael Moore might have you, I might put it. I would disagree. But to be anyway, I. Okay.
To have your
I did it with Scientology. I'm doing it now.
Your British slop spag bowl criticized by a Mosulawi refugee.
I'm not arguing. Clearly, it was dreadful. Clearly, it was. But to be fair to me, I hadn't cooked it. I just put it on, then waited an hour, and then I would eat it, which I did. And also, I've got a dog, and the dog eats things. But I ate it too, and it was fine. But I accept that I am not a good cook. I accept that one of the things I feel so passionate about the European project is that I can remember, because I'm so old, being alive in London in the late 70s, and the food was dreadful. And the only place you used to go to eat where you could eat good food was an Italian restaurant.
Yeah.
So the idea that we are in some way, better, purer, cleverer than our European neighbors, I just don't buy. And food and wine, right at the top of the list is the Italian way, with food and wine and the celebration of it, and not being snobby about it, but enjoying it, is right at the top of the list of the great.
Well, when Amy and I lived in London for 3 years, we put on about 20 pounds each because we just kept getting Indian takeaway.
Yes.
You get the best Indian food outside of India in London. You get the best Middle Eastern cuisine outside of the Middle East, and I mean all kinds: Iraqi, Persian, Turkish. Yes. The one lacuna for the UK, and it's understandable, I suppose two actually, never got good Japanese, and it is impossible. I defy anyone listening to this program on the Anglo side of this special relationship to find me good Mexican in London. It does not exist.
Well, it's a anyway, as I apologize for my spag bowl. It was wrong, and I realize I made.
You know, it's great too that you refer to spag bowl because it sounds like something out of 1984. You know, it sounds like what they would be feeding, you know, the inhabitants of Oceania.
It's like something out of 1974. I kind of didn't want to.
It's even worse. It's even worse.
I didn't want to say this, but it was that's how my mum cooked it, and you know, she's my mum, and it's kind of comfort food in the lockdown, all that kind of stuff. But it was a bit rubbish. What I'm going to try and do, and we should talk about how bad Trump and Corbyn are shortly. But what I'm going to try and do is actually follow a proper Italian recipe and see if I can produce something that looks that means that the mafia aren't going to kill me the next time I step in Italy.
I know, you just got dunked on a little bit on Twitter. It's okay. I don't think the mafia's got better things to do than to.
Yeah. No. That's a good call. All that happened was about 2,000 plus people found it amusing to take the piss out of me about my slightly rubbish food choices. And that's, in the great scheme of things, okay. What Donald Trump is doing to your country is not okay, because it looks as though, I mean, you know, the virus keeps on increasing exponentially, and he's doing nothing about it because he doesn't care.
It's not going to do anything about it. But I actually slightly disagree with you. So, you know, I am not surprised by any of this behavior. I kind of anticipated that it was going to happen this way. So far, I mean, yes, you know, there are very good cogent cases to be made that this is threatening national security because he's not allowing a transition. So he's not allowing current officials to brief the Biden transition team, including on COVID, which is now spiking all over the place. There's a question of whether or not they're going to shut down the schools here in New York City again. But there is some creative destruction taking place right now, which I think in the long term might be beneficial. Number one, according to a poll I saw, half of the 70+ million who voted for Trump simply were, quote, concerned by a Biden presidency. Not appalled, not terrified, not existentially opposed to, just concerned. That strikes me as a kind of persuadable middle ground position. Maybe they, again, you know, our old discussion, they didn't like the current culture war, they didn't like woke progressivism, whatever. These are people that can be persuaded. And I would love to see, and I think I can kind of extrapolate from here what the numbers would look like. I would love to see of that, you know, what is it, 35 million or so, how many people are now the scales have fallen from their eyes. They're completely disillusioned. They completely understand what Donald Trump is about. He is a fucking infant, tossing his toys out of the pram. I mean, putting himself to a farcical, conspiratorial degree above nation and duty. I would love to see the numbers on that. And I suspect the needle has moved. Because, you know, Americans do not like sore losers. We like people who bow out gracefully. I mean, that's why John McCain's concession speech went viral. And yes, you know, there's a dignity to losing well. He has done the opposite of that. All of these attempts, every single lawsuit chucked out of court or even diluted by the Giuliani and whatever's left of his legal team to contest the election results. Biden's numbers keep growing. I think it's now, He leads Trump in the popular vote by 6 point some odd million, or even more than that. So it does look like an overwhelming victory for Biden, if not what they would classify as a mandate, but fine. And most important of all, the Trumpist MAGA right has begun to cannibalize itself, right? So you've got Trump tweeting, don't watch Fox News. It's now essentially an extension of the fake news media. You know, they called Arizona too soon. They're lying to you. Go to OANN, go to Newsmax. You've got Tucker Carlson basically reassuring his viewers that he will remain on the air through this crisis of conscience and faith. You've got Fox News correspondents reporting from the MAGA rally that took place on Saturday in Washington, D.C. People were holding up signs saying something like, blacks and Indians are the first to go in the New World Order. And this correspondent was like visibly appalled by such a thing. So I'm not saying Fox has joined the resistance, but there are elements of Fox beginning to break away. And most important, Trump is sicking his fanatical base against Rupert Murdoch. That's one. Two, as we knew would happen, the GOP has slowly, perhaps grudgingly, but inevitably begun to move on from Trump's presidency. And even you have Marco Rubio whispering to reporters, President-elect Biden. Because what's going to happen is Trump is now, and like Mike DeWine did this on CNN, the governor of Ohio, and Trump has now declared, I think he's going to try and primary Mike DeWine. So Trump's personality cult, in his mind, shall endure. He will be the kingmaker here until eternity for the Republican Party. The Republican Party cannot exist with this kind of inherent contradiction of having to move on, post-Trump, while Trump is holding it hostage. So there is going to be a reckoning. It's begun. And again, they're devouring their own. They're attacking each other. So the long-awaited civil war in America is actually a civil war within Trumpland America. And I think ultimately that will be to the greater good. It's going to weed out some of the excesses. It's going to whittle this thing down. And yeah, I mean, look, Biden comes in kind of hamstrung. The Republican majority in the Senate means confirmation hearings are going to be difficult for certain cabinet members. But then again, if you think kind of dialectically about this, if you're an independent or you're a Republican who might have gone for Trump because you didn't like the direction the Democratic Party was headed in, or you were convinced it was headed in a certain direction, namely the DSA, AOC squad direction of democratic socialism, this, Biden being forced to pick more center left or centrist, NatSec friendly advisors and cabinet officials will appease the Republican base. So for instance, he's picked Michelle Flournoy. I don't know how to pronounce her surname correctly, or he is almost certain to pick her. She's very well respected among Republican hawks. In fact, so well respected that a lot of them were pushing her when Obama chose Chuck Hagel, who was a Republican, who they found to be a bit of a squish and too kind of cuddly with the mullahs in Tehran or whatever. So there's going to be an interesting kind of shift here taking place, both in the Democratic Party and the Republican Party. But the thing to watch now is how the Republican Party is destroying itself, because they cannot be beholden to this madman toddler who refuses to go quietly. I mean, is abasing himself, abasing the office of the presidency, abasing the party. And I mean, literally every post on Twitter is caveated with, this is bullshit, this never happened, I mean, he's become a one-man clearinghouse of disinformation and lies. So
there is, thinking outside the box for a second, my granddaughter to be, she's 1,250 quid up thanks to Trump losing. Should I double up, because she's not born yet, so I have to make the bet. Should I put the money on Trump to be the next president of the United States in 2024?
No, I mean, look.
Good, correct answer.
First of all, his niece, who's very smart, clinically trained psychologist or psychiatrist.
Mary Trump, great book, great book. Everybody
she says, you know, he'll be the same age Biden is now if he ran again in 2024. But physically, I mean, he's decrepit. He's falling apart. He is, I think, morbidly obese by clinical definition. Obviously, the mental faculties are not all there. 4 years is actually quite a long time in American politics. And, you know, the one thing he will do if he does run is he will completely sideline some of the heirs apparent, Nikki Haley, Tom Cotton, who's his likely successor in Trumpism without Trump, although doesn't really embody the same kind of spirit. Marco Rubio, who's now making alternative plans, having bent the knee to Trump for 4 years after saying he had a tiny dick during the primaries. So no, I actually don't see that happening. I think what he will likely do is create his own media empire to try and lock horns with the Murdoch empire. But the Murdoch empire has been around longer. It's savvier. It's got more money, and it does have a pretty loyal viewership, albeit an increasingly elderly one that will die out.
I can imagine. So. I can imagine Trump running. All of this I buy. I'm not going to put my unborn granddaughter's money on Trump to win at all. In fact, I can see failure, decrepitude, and disgrace staring at him down the barrel, and you can see it and feel it in the way he, whenever in the rare moments he's popping up in public, you can see he smells the fear of tomorrow. He's afraid of tomorrow, sure. Which is never a good look. What he might do is doing what he's doing to the United States right now, which is to wreck it, to be the dog in the manger, to not allow, for example, the Republican Party has got to say to him, thank you and goodbye.
They won't do that.
And therefore, I think a lot of reasonable centrist Republicans hate this sore loser stuff. I think you're exactly right. Nobody likes a sore loser. And there's something dreadful about this spectacle, which is humiliating and embarrassing and sad. It's actually bad for him. But I can imagine him running again or wrecking the Republican Party again, so they're screwed. While as you said, you know, Biden has got this political advantage in that he can't tack too far to the left because he hasn't got a Senate majority at the moment. So that Cameron really liked it when he was stuck with the Liberals in government from 2010 onwards, because he could say to the right, actually, I'm sorry, this is the only way we can get to power. So we got to do this deal. It was fantastic.
Right.
So,
and then, you know, if the Democrats make the mistake of listening to AOC, who, I mean, she's a enormously talented politician, incredible charisma, plays the social media game better than anybody in politics, but, you know, was somebody who won a primary with 17% turnout in a district that once she won the primary was inevitably going to go Democrat because it's like plus 60% or something blue. This is not somebody who has national political experience, who understands sort of the purplish districts or areas of the country. And there was a very good, you know, she was criticized in this Democratic caucus call, which was instantly leaked to the press, where I forget who it was, or no, I know who it was, I just can't pronounce her surname and I won't try. Weeping down the phone, you know, all this talk about socialism, defund the police, it fucked us, and if we do this again, we're lost in, you know, in the midterm elections and all that. So she kind of, AOC meaning, stage managed this instant rebuttal in the New York Times, and that got a lot of attention, and it sort of was a shot in the arm to the Democratic Socialists of America contingent, which think that they are the future of the party and that they already own the party. And then this other guy, I think from Pennsylvania, what's his name? Yeah, it escapes me at the moment, and I'm not even that drunk. He comes back with an interview and he's like, listen, you know, I come from an area where people still work in the coal mines, or the coal mining industry affects everything, the entire economy, from the waitress who works the diner to, you know, the Motel 6 operator to, and, you know, these things do matter, to say nothing of, you know, the very kind of variegated, quote unquote, Latino vote in America, which, I mean, as you know, I mean, Cuban Americans in Miami-Dade went hugely for Trump, because for them, the word socialism, it doesn't mean rose emojis on Twitter and, you know, Bernie Sanders talking about healthcare for all. It means people on rafts fleeing tyranny, or being thrown into the gulag. Yeah. So they, you know, the Democratic Party has to appreciate the optics and the rhetoric that some of their more progressive vanguardist party members are espousing, because it's just, it's not going to work for them if they want to maintain control or a real majority.
Biden won despite the Democratic Party's.
He won because he was the safest and the most centrist and the most kind of time-honored or time-tested and frankly bland offering. You know, everybody knew everything there is to know about Joe Biden. Yes. There was nothing new under the sun. His gaffes, I mean, you know, and in fact, the stutter, which kind of really came to light with the Atlantic expose on that, or sympathetic treatment, only made him more humane and interesting and sympathetic. Nobody really, I mean, you know, this is why this Hunter Biden laptop bullshit, it's not, that's the best that they had. There was no real Oppo research to do on Joe Biden. He's been around for 100 years. So they went with the safe, it was like a warm, almost stale bowl of farina, you know. There's not much flavor to it. It's quite like your spag bowl, but it sticks to the ribs. And on a particularly cold, haunting day, it's exactly what you need, right? That's what he is. Make America boring again was my slogan going into this thing. And make America boring again. That was my slogan.
My bad. So in Britain today, this evening, the big news is that there was a disciplinary panel looked at Corbyn's case, and the Corbynistas, sorry, not the Starmerites, being a bit rubbish at running a political machine, I think, and that's a bit of a compliment and a bit of an insult, didn't twig that actually the numbers were 3-2 pro Corbyn, and so Corbyn is back. Mm-hmm. And he hasn't, you know, he hasn't resigned, fancy word. He hasn't gone back on his statement that anti-Semitism is wrong, but it was horribly exaggerated, and I had nothing to do with it. So, like, and that statement I think is self-inflicting and dreadful. But the ability of the left to kick its own cause in the guts is terrifying, because you know, like Boris Johnson is in serious trouble. He doesn't seem to be able to, you know, he can't run the country, he can't govern, and it's a serious flaw. And he's just spouted almost exactly what the Scott Nats would love to hear.
Yeah, but so walk me through then what, you know, Corbyn's reinstatement, because there's still a sizable Corbynista cult in the Labour Party, or maybe even those who just, you know, don't like fratricidal conflict. His reinstatement, does that really hurt Keir Starmer and the fortunes of the Labour Party? I mean, Starmer was doing quite well before Corbyn was banned. And nobody thinks Keir Starmer is a squish on anti-Semitism or people talking out of turn in the party. So is it really going to impact his own political fortune?
I'm depressed by it, but I think, but I echo your judgment in that it's not going to affect Keir Starmer very much, because the big picture is it's clear Boris Johnson doesn't know how to govern. Having said that, I think the point I'm driving at is the ability of the foolish left to fuck things up.
Sure, but
for,
they, I mean,
for reasonable people who just want better government is astonishing. And and the Corbynistas who voted for him have what they care about is purity. They care about their Messiah. They don't care about the effect it will have on terms of getting, for example, a new left of centre government.
But they came as close as they have done to attaining power, and then they were defeated not by a little, and not even by a lot, but so resoundingly that it was kind of a historic drubbing, right?
Yes.
Where it terrified
yes.
typical labor voters into flipping for the conservatives for the first time in 80 years or whatever. Yes. So, that to me carries forward, and that is such a stark warning sign that, these aged and unreconstructed Stalinists and Trots, they still linger. So in fact, having Corbyn come back into the party might be a net good for somebody like Keir Starmer, because he could say, look, these people aren't going away. They are threatening to hijack us once again, which will only mean generations of Tory rule, however shambolic and intellectually and politically spent that rule may be. So it's either you side with me and the centrists, confine this lot to whatever kind of moldy corner they belong.
I've got
You're gonna go get your duck.
My duck is Brian.
I should tell our 3 viewers that before he came on, he told me he had duck in the oven, and he spent about 5 minutes explaining what a terrible cook he is. So he's now run off, and now he's back.
There's a friend of mine. I'm not going to embarrass him, but he's actually been round to my house, and I cooked roast lamb and spuds and rosemary and things like that. And he actually said, "You're a good cook." The problem is that the physical evidence that I put up on Twitter was wholly bad, and therefore I'm not even fighting it. But I think this is about accepting reality. So I accept the reality that I have on the cooking front, the entire planet thinks from Iraq to New Jersey and beyond, thinks I'm a rubbish cook because look at the picture. Okay, I've got to accept that reality. Trump should accept his reality that he's lost, and Corbyn should accept his reality that he screwed up on anti-Semitism. And it's silly for him to
screw up on anti-Semitism. I mean, he screwed up on everything. His coddling of international terrorism, his sort of, on the one hand, on the other hand, approach to genocidal dictatorship and authoritarian regimes. I mean,
yes.
And this is the problem. The far left in democratic societies, they try their damnedest. They deploy their kind of entryist mechanism, infiltrate mainstream institutions, social democratic institutions, try to remold them in their own image. And then they go to the voter and they say, ta-da, and the voter like runs shrieking from the room and says, fuck you, and it doesn't require the tabloid press to kind of dress this up in sensationalist garb. I mean, Corbyn is out there. I think he tweeted, or certainly was interviewed on British television, saying he wasn't quite sure who tried to Novichok Skripal, when every Western intelligence service was right out there to say, guess who it was? And the evidence since has only been more categorical and damning.
He said it in the House of Commons. He said it in the House of Commons, and I was on LBC that very the moment James O'Brien got me on the show. I was walking the streets of London. I'd just been somewhere, and I found it astonishing he said that. So he said it in the House of Commons. It was a big thing. It was a lot of good Labour voters said, "I'm not voting for this guy because actually, he backs Russia." I mean, hello.
It's one thing to back. I mean, backing Russia these days, whether it's the invasion of Ukraine or the attempted murder of the leader of the opposition, unfortunately, that's kind of a prevailing mindset among a lot of fringe. But what did him in on that was these people unleashed weapons of mass destruction, or a weapon of mass destruction, on British soil. And the only fatalities of that deployment were British citizens who had nothing to do with espionage or intelligence work and were not part of MI6, and they weren't defectors from Russia. They're innocents. And to deny the culpability of the actors behind it was essentially punching your own country and your own countrymen in the face. That's what fucked him on that. But they look, the far left, they alternate between sounding just incredibly angry and disgruntled about the society they inhabit and the political system that they're trying to work to their own advantage, or they sound completely mad, full of conspiracy theories, cockamamie ideology. I mean, trying to resurrect communism, which nobody fucking wants. I mean, here in the United States, they use the word socialism, but what they really mean is some form of social democracy. At least the well-meaning types do, right? So, you look into some of the kind of doctrinal stuff of the DSA, and it's like, well, what are you really talking about? Well, the people should own the means of production. Well, when you say the people, what do you mean? Is it the state? Because that's true socialism. But you have to define what the people means. And if you're going to be obscurantist and purposefully vague about this, people are going to be worried because they're going to think that you're this is some creeping ideological agenda presenting itself as mere progressivism. So, you have to be clear in your definitions. Corbyn never was. And that did him in. And yeah, I mean, when you fuck up so catastrophically as to treat one of Britain's oldest minority population and one of its most stalwart solid labor constituencies, when you treat them with contempt and you start saying murals of, hook-nosed industrialists that, well, there's nothing anti-Semitic about that, you've shit the bed. You shit the bed. And, Keir Starmer, to his, I mean, I think he can turn this to his own advantage by saying, look, I got to deal with these people. The same way that, if one day, well down the line, when my daughter is of voting age or even beyond, the Republican Party has resurrected itself as something at least rooted in its own idea of political principle, not beholden to some personality cult. Just as they can say, we're always going to be dealing with the nutters. We're always going to be dealing with the racists and the crazy libertarians and the alt-right types. We need to keep them at bay. So you need to empower us, the centrists, to do that. I think he can turn vice into virtue. I truly do. This isn't as bad as I think you think it is.
Fingers crossed. So we've got five. Let's dedicate the last 5 minutes of this to reading the tea leaves of the Republican Party from the Trump side. Who runs? Donald Jr.,
Nikki Haley, Tom Cotton.
No, on the Trump family side.
Oh, I don't. All that seemed to me a little bit overblown. I mean, if either one of the idiot sons, Uday and Quise, tried, the only way I could see
okay.
it. Like,
sorry. So our free listeners would like to know this story. So it's embarrassing, but true. There is in the Frontline Club, the wonderful Frontline Club in London, for everybody's drunk and everybody talks about Bosnia. All the women have a past, all the men have no future. And there is a display case of various sort of bits and pieces that various journalists have nicked from around the world. And I delivered a scuba mask worn by Hussein, Saddam's son. And that's donated by John Sweeney in the Frontline Club.
Hold on.
There we go. Your story, better that. Okay, folks.
One by all accounts and certainly all appearances has a pretty significant cocaine problem.
Who has? Sorry.
Donald Trump Jr. I mean, he appears.
By the way, we need to deny that, don't we?
Why? Is he going to sue me for libel? Then I get the right of discovery, so that'll be fun. I break news, Okay. Discovery is the greatest kind of indemnity for journalism. Like, all right, sue me for libel, see what comes out.
Trump denies having a major cocaine habit.
Yeah, but everything about him, especially his TV appearances, suggests that he's got he's on something, right? He is not a well man.
Because he's gurning. I'm just talking you through this. There is stuff I've seen clips of him going, which is, or whatever it does. There's a kind of
that and the speech pattern and the kind of just the frenetic style of his approach. I mean, either that or he's under such a siege mentality that, you know, he's kind of high on his own body chemicals. I don't know. And the other one is just, I think, you know, probably gets lost in Trump Tower. I mean, just strikes me as thick and inconsequential.
Who's this, Eric?
Yeah, Eric. And
Eric's
that really only leaves Ivanka. But
now Ivanka's got a chance.
No, she doesn't.
No, why not?
I mean, look, I don't think this is somebody who wants to be in politics. I mean, for her, she was always kind of the prim princess of high fashion and celebrity culture. I mean, Frank Bruni wrote a piece. I actually disagree with this piece, and I'll tell you why. But I think the title was "Jared and Ivanka, Was It Worth It?" Because they were the prince and princess of the Upper East Side, and all the swishy soirees and cocktail parties, and the Metropolitan art whatever fucking gala thing they used to go to. And he's like, you're never going to be invited to that again. I wouldn't be so sure.
Yeah, they don't care that
way. Kissinger ordered the bombing of Cambodia, and he was dating Barbara Walters not many years later. I mean, so New Yorkers tend to move on from political ignominy very quickly, and celebrity culture has the fucking memory of a housefly. But that's where I think they're most comfortable. And so the idea in her mind, so I see Ivanka as sort of, being the Stepford wife for 4 years, like playing this part, inhabiting this role she just can't stand. I think she wants to return. I think she wants to have her clothing line back on the rack at Macy's or wherever it was, build her brand. That's what she is. She always was like that. She didn't have political ambition.
Melania, do you think
divorce? The rumor was that she was getting it on with the security guard at Trump Tower or something. So I just imagine this like thick-necked Albanian gang that Trump has hired.
That is denied. Blah blah blah. I used to work for the BBC. I have to. It's just in my
gene. Part of the BBC anymore. I mean, I'm not saying this is true. I'm saying this is a rumor.
Okay, so
it has been alleged.
Right now, hold on a second. No. You do it this way. There is no suggestion that Melania was shagging the security guard at Trump Tower.
Right. But there is a strong body language suggestion that she would rather put hot pokers in her eyes than ever touch Donald Trump's microphallus ever again. So does that bespeak a healthy long-term marriage? No, I don't think it does. Maybe maybe they have found each other. They have bonded in kind of common martyrdom, in a sense of everyone hates us. Let's stick together.
But if Trump something is uncovered which is seriously awful, and I think that's quite possible, where's Trump go? Trump and Melania. I think my bet would be Tehran.
If I were your shoes, and Olivia Nuzzi is a very good political reporter at New York Magazine. She tweeted out, my prediction is he's just going to go to Mar-a-Lago and stay there and never come back. And he'll do this at some point before the inauguration. He'll just be like, oh, I'm working from Florida. Fuck off. And he'll just stay there. Because he's going to live in Florida probably rather than New York. Because the Floridians love him and New Yorkers do not. If I were him, and I'm not given to these sort of far-fetched, ooh, what if this, what'll happen is Joe will pick Michelle Obama and Michelle Obama will become the new, no. But the one thing I did read, which kind of sort of made sense to me, is if he resigned formally before the inauguration and Pence became, acting president, but really just kind of a steward for the transition, Pence could pardon him for any federal crimes that might come down the pike, but that he would still face state crimes. So any kind of tax dodginess, any kind of you know, financial malfeasance, the states could still go after him where he's done business. But at least he would be
immune,
indemnified from federal prosecution, which is the bigger one. So, you know, and according to Olivia Nuzzi's own reporting, he's long been terrified in the job of assassination, prosecution, and just the day-to-day business of being president. He doesn't want any of those things. So, you know, but I think the one thing that ranges against that is he cannot profess to be a loser or a quitter, right? We see this now. He cannot concede. So for him to resign is him saying, I'm a quitter. And I think in his own psyche, it would fracture. He couldn't do that. But if he were smart and pragmatic, that's what he should do at this point. Yeah, nothing to lose.
Yeah. That's a fascinating dilemma. Before we go, I need to say that I am better than Donald Trump and Jeremy Corbyn because I accept that as far as cooking spag bowl is concerned, I'm a loser. You've been listening to The Last Call with me, John Sweeney in London, and Mike Weiss in New York. Thanks for listening, folks.